We got one more guest here for this Thursday edition of Bang the Book Radio. That is professional handicapper Tony George from Doc Sports. Tony, how's it going today, man?
Doing good. Just tallying up the totals in the NBA for the first half of the season and set a record for units won in my 27 years in the first half of the NBA season. So still got one more game to go before the All-Star break, Adam. So I'm not going to break my arm, pat myself on the back, but fired up about the second half of that for sure.
So here's a question for you. I mean, obviously we talk about teams going into the break, whether it's MLB, NHL, NBA, and the teams that are playing really well, they don't want the All-Star break. The teams that are not playing well, they're thrilled to step away from it for a little bit. I take it since you're running hot right now, you just want this thing to keep going day after day after day.
Yeah, I'm a little pissed off the break's coming, that's for sure. We're on a 30-15 roll here. Up 89 units, $100 player, up $7,140. We document all that over at Docs. And we found a lot of value, at least I found a lot of value, and I started doing this late last year and just did a crap ton of it this year. A lot of first-half lines in the NBA, and just from I guess, a situational analysis and how I look at things, even from a layman's term, how many times have you sat around the bar with your buddies talking about NBA games? They go, well, don't even bother watching until the last 5 minutes, And because there's a lot of times you got a team laying a big number and they're up, 15 at halftime, then they get complacent and they let teams hang around, get back in it. They protect the lead. They don't come out with the same intensity in the second half after they've been putting it to somebody. And I thought, why not take advantage of that and cut that line down in about half? If the team's laying 8 or 9, now they're laying 3.5 or 4, and only 3 first-half line losses, Adam, the entire first half of the season using that philosophy, and 77% with those picks alone. So that's an angle that I've been using. I really don't mess with first-half totals, but the first half lines, and there's some games, obviously I don't take all favorites. I'll take plus the number as well. But it's always a nice scenario, too, I found, when you're looking at the NBA, especially fading teams off back-to-backs in the first half scoring. They tend to come out lethargic and a little sluggish. The Knicks tonight, probably a good example. They're off a game against Philly where Atlanta's rested and they beat L.A. And so, Atlanta's laying out around 8, 7.5, 8, 8.5 in that game, which they probably should be because the Knicks just absolutely stink worse than anything. But at the end of the day, you can cut that down to 4, 4.5. You find value in lines like that, so, you really don't want to lay 8.5 with a team like Atlanta with their record, against anybody, but at the end of the day, we're finding a lot of value with those and been highly successful. And we'll continue to utilize that philosophy in the second half of the season.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, too, where, as the game wears on, the better team usually gets it going, or at least you would think, that they would get it going. Mm-hmm. So you do take some of that variance and some of that volatility out of the equation by looking at the first half. So I think that's a really strong way to look at it. Sort of walk us through, when you look at first half lines compared to the full game lines, you said that they're sort of cut in half a little bit. So do you generally tend to just take that first half win, or will you look to sort of double down in the second half, on a personal handicapping level?
At times, and we've talked about this before, times it is a huge advantage to live in Las Vegas. Now, obviously, you can do it online, I guess. It's not 100% legal, but out here with these apps you have on your phone for stations and Westgate, CG, and William Hill, you have them all on your phone, and you're, they geo-track your telephone so they know you're within the borders of Nevada, and you can wager these games at halftime. I do it more so in college than the NBA, where I'll take a look where, I'm losing that. I'm losing that. And, I didn't see this coming. These guys didn't show up, or a player that was supposed to not play ended up playing, for a team that was listed as doubtful. And then he comes out in the SOB's got 12 points at halftime and 6 boards, and he was, supposedly in a walking boot 2 days before, that sort of thing. So you have an advantage, doing this 27 years that you see how games unfold. There's so many games I've seen, Adam, over 27 years where I'll look at my wife or watching games. She's stuck with my lifestyle, or my buddy sitting at my local watering hole. I go up, there's a sports bar, and watch all the TVs are all on the games. And I'll look at them and go, I've seen this movie before. I know how it turns out. And utilizing some of that experience, using those halftime lines, is a great angle as well. But, yeah, these first half lines, I've just been highly successful with them. I've got kind of a system. There's all kinds of websites you can go to online that have a lot of scoring statistics, and they break it down by quarters and halves. And I found a couple of websites out there that really are some great tools, and it all boils down to recent form. I saw a team that was scoring, like 52 points in the first half on the season, and then I go in and I look at their last 5, and they're scoring 61. And they're way up on their matrix. So, and they were an underdog. I think it was like Miami, and they were playing Denver here 3 days ago. We had a big top play on them. They were catching 6, and they ended up, I think they were only down 5. It had us close, but, not too many people are going to take Miami on a fourth leg of a road series in elevation at Denver, but Denver was beat up in that game. But anyway, you're able to catch the points. And then the other thing is, a lot of times, you find out teams like the Lakers who really don't close well. They played Atlanta the other night. They end up getting beaten Atlanta, but they were only laying 2 points in the first half. And they covered that, but as usual, they faded late. So, you're taking tendencies and how teams are trending, and you utilize that to your, the best way to bet them's in the first half, not the second half, put it that way. There's a lot of teams out there that are good first half teams and crappy second half teams, and you just got to follow those statistics and watch them, Adam, and you're going to find some value in the NBA.
Now, what about attacking first halves from a market entry standpoint? I mean, do you worry about, what's going to happen with the line movement for the full game? Do you sort of sit on that and be patient before hitting the first halves, or, are you just jumping on these things as they get posted?
I come right out of the gate with them. We got to have our plays out here at 8:30 Pacific every day, or I guess it's 9 Pacific or 10. I guess it's 10 Pacific for NBA and 8:30 Pacific for college basketball. That's how Doc's runs their system there. But nonetheless, no, I look at them. I actually handicap the games. When the lines come out the day before, any given day. Like today's games, the lines, by yesterday at 4 o'clock, I was looking at lines. And I have a power rating, so I know where the lines are pretty much going to be, And then I start looking at those first half statistics and seeing where they're coming out. And then you do wait, at night, like I wanted to wait like tonight, just an example. You want to sit around and see how bad or how deep into the bench and how fatigued the Knicks were trying to beat the Sixers last night. And then they got to go on the road. They've won. They're 2-30. Their last 32 games. I think they've lost 17 in a row or something. It's just pathetic. And it's the day before the All-Star break. Last thing these guys want to do is travel. The last thing these guys want to do is play a game. So you look at those scenarios and you look at those lines, and then the minute the halftime lines don't open up right away, they're more in the morning. But when I see them and it's ripe, I jump on it and get it posted.
So do you adopt the same approach then in college basketball as well, or do you kind of wait for the market to sort of settle in, or are you just firing away in college too?
No. College is different. No, you wait around, see what the market's going to do, and react to it from there. I think I've done only college basketball. I've only done probably 4 or 5 first half lines. And it usually was a really good team. I won a couple with Michigan, who Michigan seems to get out, especially early in the season. We're getting out real well in the first half, and then kind of struggling I don't know how many times I've watched a Michigan game where I'm sitting here sweating out free throws with 43 seconds left, hoping that the other team misses them because Michigan pissed away a lead. They end up still winning, and they were laying some premium numbers, and the line the market took a while to catch up to Michigan. Now they've caught up and they're putting premium numbers on them. But it's just an example. I do wait around and see how the line movement goes on those college games before I start making any big moves.
All right, so we've got one more day of the NBA here before the All-Star break begins. For 24 teams, the All-Star break has already started. For 6 teams, the All-Star break begins after the final horn tonight. Overs yesterday in the NBA, 10-1. The only game it didn't go over, Milwaukee and Indiana. So does that sort of lead into what your thoughts would be for tonight's 3 games?
Yeah, you're not going to see much defense tonight. No, nobody really gives a rat's ass. I mean, you've got 236 on New Orleans. Charlotte and Orlando look ripe at 213. They really do. Orlando is off a huge win. Obviously, the 225 in Atlanta. You just don't know what New York's going to bring to the table tonight. That scares me about that game. I stay away from that. But both Oklahoma City and the Oklahoma City, New Orleans, and then Orlando, Charlotte. Anytime you can get a total. Hell, Adam, I never thought I'd say this. But anytime you get a total under 215, you got to be looking to take the over. I mean, you just don't see too many totals under 210 anymore, which is amazing. There's absolutely no defense that is being played in the NBA. There's a couple of good defensive teams. Indiana, you spoke of them last night, but Indiana can play some good defense. Detroit can play some decent defense. And there's a lot of teams like that that in order to win games, they have to hold opponents down to under, 110 in order to have a shot at winning. But for the most part, I was shocked at that stat last night. I was all in on Sacramento last night for a big, huge top play, catch an 8 at Denver. And that's a team that I think I would just like to say this. That's a team that everybody wants to keep an eye on in the second half out west. They're going to make some noise. They've got a great young backcourt with Heidel and Fox. I can't even imagine how good they would be if they could have hung on to Cousins. But this is a good basketball team, and anytime they're a big underdog, you want to take a look at them, Adam.
Now, the one thing about this is, a lot of times, and I say this in Major League Baseball especially since it's something I cover on a daily basis over at Bang the Book, I usually try to avoid the times before the All-Star break because I just don't know where teams are from a motivational standpoint. But then, the more you kind of look at this thing, the 10-1 to the over makes sense. Or, teams on the road punting that last game in the NHL or Major League Baseball or something. Maybe I need to change my thought process with that. And, it's just one of those things where everyone gets scared with something that's unique or out of the ordinary. Maybe you just want to take it for what it's worth.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to adapt a little bit. I have found, especially in college sports, that the old school handicapping techniques don't always work, and you need to adapt. And much like the NFL, the NBA is all about offense and nothing about defense. You don't hear about any, shutdown defenses in the NBA, dominating, the standings. It's not that way. You got to find teams with, more so than anything, you're going to have to weigh your shooting percentages in the last 5 games between teams. The teams with the better shooting percentages, especially from three-point range, simply are the teams you're going to have to take if they're in a groove. Just look at those last 5-game stats, get a feel for where they're at right here, right now. Anybody right now that's looking at season-long stats in the NBA, you're not going to win a lot of games. Using power ratings based on those. You want to go off the last 5 and how they're trending. And right now, the NBA is trending over comes to these totals. It's just insane, some of these games that you see. 250, 260, 270 points being scored. Total sitting at 236, and you're scared to death to take the over. And it flies over by 25 points. It's just, that's the nature of the beast right now.
One last thing I want to ask you about with the NBA here, and we'll be able to talk about this more on next week's segment, but overnight lines will come out on Wednesday, obviously, so I want to leave our listeners with a couple of thoughts coming out of the All-Star break. What is your approach to that, where these guys are off for about a week?
Well, you want to be careful. I talked about a documented plus 89 units for the first half of the season. Last year, my total for the season was 78 to the good, Adam, which is a good year, for a $100 player. But at the end of the day, I've garnered those units pretty much taking one game at a time, one play at a time, one bet per day, maybe two. I think I've had like 3 triple headers the entire season, and the bottom line is, as I've said on your show a million times, less is more. You might as well tattoo that to my wife's rear end because that's my motto. You take it easy coming out of the break, but you want to start looking teams with a big lead that might want to coast out of the gate a little bit, that aren't as motivated. You want to start looking at those teams in the playoff standings, and you can go get on any various websites, probably even Bang the Book for all I know. You can go in there and look at the playoff picture right now. Those teams that are ranked 12th through about 6th, all vying for that crucial 8th spot to get in the playoffs. So, the number 1 seed can kick their ass when they get in the playoffs, but nonetheless, they're all vying for those playoffs. And so I always look at those teams and who's motivated. You take a look at the East and the West, and there's a lot of teams within 3 or 4 games going 12 deep into the standings that are only 3 or 4 games out of the playoff spot. So I always kind of keep an eye on those teams, see who was surging at the end of the first half of the season before the All-Star break, and hopefully that momentum continues into the second half. But I always take a look at those teams. I look to fade the top teams that are coasting, and start taking a hard look at the teams in that crucial 6 to 12 spot, because they're all going to play hard to get in the playoffs. And I cherry pick a few out of those out of the gate, but I keep the volume low for about the first week before these teams start getting their chemistry back and gelling together, because they're all going 15 different ways from Sunday during the All-Star break for a little vacation. Those that aren't playing, and you'll see a lot of teams too, Adam, like Golden State, for instance, got a bunch of players in the All-Star game. Some of these superstar teams, Houston, James Harden, some of these big superstars, the Greek Freak, they're in Milwaukee, Giannis. You start taking a look at those teams and who they're playing out of the gate, because these superstar players are theirs that are putting up 27 points a night and 10 boards aren't going to come into those first few games 100% because they've been out at the All-Star break doing a little partying, wearing themselves out, that sort of thing, and getting their focus back is a key, and it takes a little bit.
All right, now let's transition over to the college hardwood for a couple of minutes. Obviously right now at this time of the year, you're talking about a lot of rematches and some revenge games here in conference play. So what's the handicapping mindset with those types of games, Tony?
Well, sometimes, I read this in your email you sent me. You kind of wanted to touch on this, and I was thinking about it. And I've always had a philosophy about revenge and rematches. These teams in conference that play twice, a year. And this year it's been a little bit different, and I'll use the Missouri Valley as an example because you and I have talked about it over the years. It's one of my specialty conferences. The home-road dichotomy, if you're on the road in Mo Valley, you were just going to lose. Even going back to when Wichita State and Creighton were in it, you number 1 team playing the number 12 team, if you were going on the road, your chances of losing were pretty high, and your chances of covering 5 or 6 on the road were almost impossible. Same thing in the Big 12. Now all that has changed. We had Kansas State the other night catching points at Texas, and it's like, well, Texas at home, they just beat Oklahoma. They had Kansas all they wanted in there. Kansas State can't put up a lot of points, and it's just tough to win on the road. It's not that way this year. But the one thing that I look at is, and you do have to factor in revenge, and especially if they have revenge at home. If they lost on the road, they were the better team, they're at home, you might want to jump on a team like Kansas. You might want to jump on a team like Michigan State. You might want to jump on a team like Duke, that may have lost on the road. Now they're at home. Of course, they're going to stick a premium number on them. But at the end of the day, for the most part, Team A beats Team B by 12 points, as a 1-point favorite on the road or a 2-point underdog or whatever. It might just be by the simple fact, Adam, that they're just flat out a better basketball team. So you got to break down the statistics, and I don't look at the last game statistics. You'll go in there and say, well, they lost, they shot 28%. You take a look at what the game was and you factor that in a little bit. But at the end of the day, a lot of teams just beat teams because they're better than they are. And nothing has changed in the 2 weeks since they played. As a matter of fact, one team may have gotten even better and the other guy may have gotten even worse. So it's all about situational analysis. But at the end of the day, I do look for revenge spots, or I do look for, kind of a season split. You see a lot of season splits on home and homes, but it's not something that you just plug in and go, oh, they're due to beat them now, they're going to beat them at home. No, then maybe the fact is the other team's just better than they are, and if the number's right, I'm not afraid to go against that trend, Adam.
And I think that's the key thing. I think a lot of people and, a lot of novice handicappers, I don't want to say they get lazy, but they oversimplify what revenge actually means. I mean, if that first game was played in early January and was the first road conference game for a team, or there's a big strength of schedule discrepancy played out the way that it did, it doesn't necessarily mean that the other team is going to get revenge here or vice versa, but simply that every game is unique. And teams, as you mentioned, have gotten better over the course of the conference play season. Maybe there was a lot of turnover. They played a weak non-conference schedule. Now they're in better form. You just don't want to take it for granted that, oh, this team's going to get revenge. I think too many people fall into that trap.
And there's a couple of them, that I circle, in a big game. And I'll give you an example because, not only the Mo Valley, I follow the Big 12. Kansas lost at K-State. They're going to play at Kansas again before the season's over, and Kansas State's first in the Big 12, and Kansas is number 2. And know Bill Self and company, right now they're a little beat up. They've got some injury issues. They've got some depth issues. They've got really don't have a true point guard. Kansas has won numerous games without a true point guard over the years. But that might be a game where I think a team is going to exact some revenge on a very strong home floor. The problem is it's going to be real interesting to see where that number's at, because when Kansas ends up lining up against K-State, in revenge mode, Sunflower State showdown type thing, because these guys hate each other. Their fans hate each other. I grew up in the Midwest. I've been to games in Manhattan and in Lawrence when they played each other. It is not pretty. There is no love lost between these two teams. Although there's some mutual respect among Weber and Self as in terms of coaching, at the end of the day, they want to beat the hell out of each other. And if you can catch that number with Kansas, around maybe 4 or 5, hopefully it'd be less than that. But at the end of the day, there are certain games I will circle and say, I want to see what this line is when this game pops up on the schedule, because if there might be an opportunity for a very strong home team to exact a little bit of revenge. But then again, Kansas goes into, let's just use a hypothetical, Adam. Say Kansas is coming in there because Kansas has been inconsistent all year long. Say they go in there and they've lost 2 straight, and it looks like they're going to be due, and this is the game. You still got to look at the right here, right now, and what the situation is coming into that game. But right now, the way I'm looking at it, Kansas State's playing as good as anybody in the Big 12 right now, and if that number's, around 3-ish, that might be a revenge spot where you can get a manageable number that you can handicap into and bet into a really good number, on a home floor that's clearly worth 4 points. There are very few home floors that are worth 4 points in college basketball. Duke's one of them. Kansas is one of them. There's a few others you can go into and say, this is clearly not your 2 or 3 point, it's in excess of that. So you figure that into the line with your power rating, and in a couple of those revenge spots, you might be able to find some opportunity.
Tony George, professional handicapper over at Doc Sports. What's going on over at Doc's right now, Tony?
Well, we're on a nice little 10-5 run in college basketball. Got a nice little doubleheader tonight. Small conference, a lot of small conference action games tonight. Finding a lot of opportunity with these, I call them hidden gems. I got a couple tonight where I had almost 7 or 8 point overlays against the spread based on the number. I think the odds makers fell asleep at the wheel of the getaway car there, Adam. So I'm going to go ahead and put out doubleheader, and then we got one play in the NBA tonight, and it is a first half line play, and we're ending the season on a 30-15 run. Hopefully we're taking it to 31-15, and I did just go to DocSports.com. Every card's guaranteed. And, of course, don't forget my YouTube page. Sample size of 522 games, daily free play videos, 61% the last 16 months. Documented. We document those on the website, so be sure and get over and see my video over at YouTube.
Make sure you follow Tony on Twitter as well, at TGeorgeSports. Tony, appreciate the time as always, sir. Thank you so much for joining me. Chat with you again next week.
Okay, thanks, Adam.